Εκ μέρους των Public, χαιρόμαστε ιδιαίτερα που σας έχουμε κοντά μας. Όλοι μαζί χαιρόμαστε ακόμα περισσότερο που έχουμε την χαρά να φιλοξενούμε τον διεθνούς φήμη επιστήμονα, ομότιμο καθηγητή ηθολογίας και εξελικτικής βιολογίας της Οξφόρδης, Ρίτσαρντ Ντόκινς, και είναι ιδιαίτερη χαρά για εμάς, ειδικά φέτος, που τα Public κλείνουν 10 χρόνια. Η απόψινή εκδήλωση πραγματοποιείται με την υποστήριξη της Ένωσης Αθέων, της Ένωσης Ουμανιστών και Ουμανιστριών Ελλάδος, αλλά και του Hub και του The Hub Science. Ιδιαίτερες ευχαριστίες στον δημοσιογράφο Μάκη Προβατά, που θα προλογίσει τη συζήτηση, και την ακτιβίστρια ανθρωπίνων δικαιωμάτων Ελίζα Γκορόγια, που θα αναλάβει το συντονισμό. Και φυσικά το μεγαλύτερο ευχαριστώ στις εκδόσεις Κάτωπτρο και τον κύριο Αλέξανδρο Μάμαλη, που είχε τη χαρά να με σηκώσει το τηλέφωνο πριν από μία εβδομάδα ακριβώς και να μας αναγγείλει το ευχάριστο γεγονός ότι ο Ρίτσαρντ Ντόκινς βρίσκεται στην Ελλάδα και να μας δώσει τη δυνατότητα να διοργανώσουμε την απόψινή βραδιά. Σας ευχαριστούμε πολύ από τα Public που βρίσκεστε κοντά μας. Καλώ τον κύριο Μάμαλη να μας πει 2 λόγια.
Σας ευχαριστώ πολύ. Ο ρόλος του εκδότη δεν είναι να ανεβαίνει στο βήμα και να απευθύνεται στο κοινό, παρά να βγάζει καλά βιβλία και να γνωρίζει στο κοινό τους επιστήμονες και τους συγγραφείς. Έτσι, μάλλον καταχρηστικά νιώθω ότι βρίσκομαι σε αυτό το σανίδι απόψε, για να χρησιμοποιήσω μόνο 1 λεπτό και να πω τα εξής. Οι εκδόσεις Κάτωπτρο καλωσορίζουν τον άνθρωπο, τον επιστήμονα, τον καθηγητή, με πολύ χαρά τον καλωσορίζουν, Ρίτσαρντ Ντόκινς. Έχουμε εκδώσει 4 βιβλία ως εκδόσεις του καθηγητή. Είναι σημαντικοί τίτλοι, έχουν μεταφραστεί και κυκλοφορούν σχεδόν σε όλο τον πλανήτη. Αν έχουμε χρόνια μπροστά μας, ελπίζω ότι θα βγάλουμε και άλλα βιβλία. Βιβλία του Ρίτσαρντ Ντόκινς έχουν βγάλει και άλλοι εκδότες. Είναι όλα σπουδαία, αγοράστε τα, διαβάστε τα, μόνο να κερδίσετε έχετε. Θέλω να ευχαριστήσω όλους εσάς απόψε που μας τιμάτε με την παρουσία σας. Ξέρω ότι αγαπάτε την επιστήμη, ξέρω ότι αναζητάτε τη γνώση και την επιστημονική αλήθεια. Ξέρω ότι στρέφετε την πλάτη σας στο σκοταδισμό και τις ιδεολειψίες. Σας ευχαριστώ όλους θερμά, από καρδιάς.
Να δούμε ένα σύντομο βίντεο.
Your hypocrisy. I suggest that you find the longest crowbar you can find to pull your head out of your behind. If there is no order in evolution, how were you born with your head on your shoulders? Dawkins, you're so smart in your own eyes, you can't comprehend simple Bible passages and misconstrue them for your own bullshit dogma. I read your book about the Bible. It is totally sucks ass and is biased and one-sided propaganda. Your theory sucks. You are not as wise as you think you are. You hypocrites want to condemn anybody for making mistakes or believing different from your bullshit, retard, atheism dogma. Dawkins' books are fucking stupid bullshit. If you do not have God in your life, then what is the point of your life? Pointless. When you die, that's it, game over. How pointless is that? I really feel sorry for you all, but it's not too late to turn to God. 3 words from God to you. Dear atheist, this is what God says about you. You are a fool. This one is from somebody called Ann Coulter. I defy any of my co-religionists to tell me they do not laugh at the idea of Dawkins burning in hell. You suck. Go burn in hell. Satan will enjoy torturing you. What happened? Mum didn't pay enough attention to you, so you decided to rebel. I hope for your own sake you see your grave mistake and repent. God dwells among as every day. You are the spawn of evil. Christian living for God. I hope you die slowly and you fucking burn in hell, you damn blasphemy. Right now you are rotting on the inside, but you must know that there is indeed a God, a great God, and he will forgive you if you regret from your fucking behavior. And you should realize that your entire life has been a delusion, and that right now your destiny is all fucked up, fucking atheist.
Oh, Jesus.
Our God is a loving God, but if you keep peddling this kind of filth, then I pity you when Jesus returns. I hate your fucking guts. Ha ha, you fucking dumbass. I hope you get hit by a church van tonight and you die slowly. Thank you for joining me in a reading of my hate mail.
Καλησπέρα και από μένα. Λέγομαι Μάκης Προβατάς. Φαντάζομαι ότι η στιγμή που περιμένετε δεν είναι εμένα να μιλάω για τον Ρίτσαρντ Ντόκινς. Γι' αυτό και μπορούμε να υποδεχτούμε την Human Rights Activist, την κυρία Ελίζα Γκορόγια, η οποία θα συνοδεύει τον κύριο Ρίτσαρντ Ντόκινς. Παρακαλώ.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Richard. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this, to have this conversation today. And welcome to a country full of contradictions, a country whose constitution begins with the words, "In the name of the Holy Trinity." A country that convicted a blogger on the grounds of malicious blasphemy, and a country where extreme right parliamentarians join forces with priests in order to protest a theater play that suggests homoeroticism between Jesus and his disciples. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I need to apologize. I have a terrible cold. My voice doesn't normally sound like this, so my apology. I must say I do think as a scientist that more attention to be paid to the common cold. We have massive research effort put into much more serious diseases, but if you think about it, the common cold probably accounts for more lost hours of enjoyment and work than many other diseases, and it's rather a shame that it's treated as a kind of joke. I feel very strongly about it just at the moment.
Okay, let's start.
Yes.
I have an easy one. What is the answer to life, the universe, and everything?
Oh, very easy, yes. Well, you all know the true answer, which is 42. Perhaps you... well, the true answer to life, the universe, and everything, the scientific answer is that we now pretty much understand what life is about. We pretty much understand that life is a product of Darwinian natural selection, and anywhere in the universe where something equivalent to DNA comes into being, something self-replicating, something equivalent to genetics, information which is copied through something that you can call generations, whenever that happens, then the remarkable phenomenon that we call life will come into existence. We don't know how many places in the universe that has happened. We only know of one example of it. There may be only one example. I doubt it. I think there are probably lots. So that's the scientific answer. But that sounds like rather a bleak, cold answer to individual humans. And for an individual human, the meaning of life and everything is what you make of it. And so we can all make a meaning for ourselves, which can be really rather little to do with the scientific answer to the question. We can give our lives meaning, we can have aims, we can have desires, we can have constructive things that we want to achieve in the world before we leave it. And to me, that's the other, at least as important answer to the question.
I have a word about, I have a question about the word atheist.
Right.
Atheist in Greek and in many other languages is a dirty word. The expression to not have a god, δεν έχει το Θεό του, as you also tweeted, means to be untrustworthy, immoral, capable of all vices. Why is the lack of a belief in a god associated with immorality?
This is an extraordinary fact, but you're right, it's true. There's a story told by the American comedian Julia Sweeney, and she did a wonderful monologue explaining how she escaped from, in her case, the Roman Catholic Church. And it's a beautiful piece, very, very amusing, very witty. And she describes towards the end of this how when it became known in the local newspaper that she was an atheist, her mother telephoned and said, "Well, I don't mind you not believing in God, but an atheist?" Something about the word has acquired a kind of triggering effect, which is very unfortunate. As you say, Elisa, it is associated in people's minds with a lack of morality. I find it a most extraordinary proposition that you need a God in order to be moral. If you think about it, if you think about that, the idea that you get your morality from the Bible or from the Quran is an utterly disgusting idea. If you actually read the Bible and imagine getting your morality from it, what a horrible world we would live in. We would be stoning people to death for adultery. We would be killing homosexuals. We would be prejudiced against women even more than we actually are. It would be a horrible world in which to live. The Bible and the Quran are exactly what you do not want to base your morals on. The other main reason why you might get your morality from religion would be because you're frightened of God. The only reason you're good is that you're frightened of being punished in hell or you want to be rewarded in heaven. What an ignoble reason to be good. Would you really want to be friends with somebody who only wanted to be good because he's sucking up to God, because he's looking at the great spy camera in the sky and worried about not only God seeing what he does, but reading his thoughts? So it would be a very bad idea to get your morality from religion. And as a matter of fact, we don't get our morality from religion. Nobody nowadays does, because nowadays we have a completely different kind of morality from that which you'll get from the Bible. Nowadays we've abolished slavery, we believe in kindness, we don't sacrifice people, we don't punish people for breaking the Sabbath. All these things have completely changed, and they've changed not because of religion, but in spite of religion. They've changed because of political improvement, because of changes in our conversation, because of legal cases, because of parliamentary cases. In every respect almost you can think of, we are now living in a more moral world, a better moral world. We've still got a long way to go, but we're living in a more moral world than could possibly have been conceived of in the desert tribes who wrote the Bible and the Quran.
People call you Darwin's Rottweiler, yet you say you are against the Darwinian society. What does that mean?
Well, first of all, Rottweilers are very kind, beautiful, gentle dogs. But they do have a reputation for aggression. Did somebody have a comment there? No. What was the end of the question? Sorry.
That you say you're against the Darwinian society. What
yes.
does that mean?
Darwinian natural selection is the explanation for the whole of life. But that does not mean that we should base our morality, our values, our politics, our society on Darwinism. A society based on Darwinian principles would be a very, very nasty society in which to live. You should learn your Darwinism as a lesson in how not to construct a society. We want to live in the most un-Darwinian society we can, while at the same time acknowledging that Darwinians and natural selection is the explanation for all of life.
We, Greeks, now officially have an atheist prime minister, yet there is no separation of church and state. How can we fight for that?
Well, I'm delighted that you have an atheist prime minister, and I suspect that there are rather more atheist prime ministers around the world than admit it, because of the stigma which we talked about earlier. It would not surprise me in the least if President Obama was an atheist, but of course he has to end all his speeches by saying, "God bless America." I suspect that Bill Clinton was probably an atheist. I suspect that J.F. Kennedy was probably an atheist. But they all have to pay lip service to religion. In America, that's rather odd, because the American Constitution is avowedly secularist. It's not a religious constitution. I've just learned from Elisa's opening speech that Greece does have a religious constitution. Britain doesn't have a written constitution at all, but in effect, the unwritten constitution is religious in the sense that the Queen is the titular head of the Church of England, and it's by kind of historical accident. The Queen probably really is religious, I suspect. But your question, what should you do about it? I wouldn't presume to tell Greek people, notoriously independent-minded, what they should do about anything.
We know what you do not like about people, but what are your favorite attributes of the human species?
My favorite attributes of the human species are the ones which actually signify a departure from a Darwinian world. So kindness, generosity, altruism, giving, cooperation. These are all characteristics which are either very difficult to explain by Darwinian means or impossible to explain. So I value kindness, generosity, empathy, sympathy. These are wonderful characteristics which humans have. I can kind of give a Darwinian account of how they came about, but we have to do our Darwinism in a very sophisticated way in order to account for these really rather wonderful human qualities.
In times of austerity and crisis, many people turn to more conservative ideas, including religion. Do you understand why there is this tendency, this correlation between affluence and rational thinking?
There is good evidence for the correlation between times of austerity, times of difficulty, and religion. The evidence comes from, for example, an American researcher called Gregory Paul, who studied different countries in Europe and different states within the United States of America, correlating religiosity with various things. And he found that those countries and those states which have a well-developed welfare system, where they have a national health service of some kind, where the poor are looked after, where the elderly are looked after, where the sick are looked after, that those countries tend to be, in those states, tend to be the least religious, which I think is the effect you're I suppose, if you're asking me to explain why that is, and I'm not sure that I have an answer to that. I suppose when people lose faith in humanity to look after them, they tend to turn to supernatural hope, which is futile, and it would be much better if they turned to think of ways of trying to make life better in this world. But I suppose maybe if you are having a horrible time in this world, you pin your hopes on another world to come. Unfortunately, there isn't one.
Are you surprised to know that there are still people that worship the Olympian gods?
I am very surprised. These are questions submitted, are they, Lisa? Yes. In one sense, it's actually no more absurd to worship Zeus and Apollo than it is to worship Jesus and Muhammad and Yahweh. I mean, they're all absurd. And in a way, within the lesson we should take from the fact that virtually nobody nowadays worships the Olympian gods is that one day the same will be true. Yahweh, Jehovah, Allah will go the same way. I have kind of learned that those people who do claim to still worship the Olympian gods, perhaps they don't really worship them as superhuman people. They might have turned their belief into a kind of, turned the ancient belief, which really was in supernatural beings, into a kind of symbolic version. And that's actually true also of many Christians. If you actually tackle some Christians, even some bishops, and ask them, do you really believe that Jesus walked on water or turned water into wine or was born of a virgin? They will often say, oh no, that's just symbolic, we don't believe that anymore. And I suppose it's possible that some people who claim to worship the Olympian gods will say something like, oh well, we just use the word Apollo as a symbol for nature or something like that, or a symbol for the sun or something like that. I find that this whole idea of retaining something that looks like religion by calling it symbolic is pernicious, because it misleads people into thinking that there really is something in religion, when if you dig down deeper, you discover that actually it's all symbolic anyway and doesn't mean anything.
But isn't it extraordinary that you would leave the mainstream religion and then make all the effort to have this eccentric, almost obsolete...
Well, it depends on the motive. I could imagine that one motive for doing that would be to point out the absurdity of the mainstream religion, which is the purpose of the god of the church of the flying spaghetti monster. And the purpose of that is to say anybody can make up a religion, because religion is made up anyway. And so we're going to make up a new religion of the flying spaghetti monster. And another way to do that would be to say, well, we might as well worship Zeus and Apollo, or we might as well worship Thor and Wotan, the Norse gods. If that was your motive, I would think it was rather a good motive, because you would be ridiculing the mainstream religion. And maybe some of them are doing that, I don't know.
Given the rise of far-right in Greece and the Golden Dawn entering the parliament, how can secularists criticize Islam without being labeled racist or xenophobic?
It is rather absurd to label criticism of Islam as racist or xenophobic. Islam is not a race, Islam is a religion. The most populous country, Islamic country in the world is Indonesia. Very different race from Arabs, very different race from Pakistanis. So it's simply absurd to use the pejorative label racist for somebody who criticizes Islam. Islam deserves to be criticized just as much as any other religion. All religions deserve to be criticized. All religions are absurd and ridiculous, and Islam is no exception. And insofar as it has a bad impact on people's lives, it deserves to be criticized more. To use words like Islamophobic to criticize people who criticize Islam as racist is an excuse, it's a distraction, it's a digression from what is a very serious point, which is that Islam is a ridiculous religion along with all other religions.
What's your opinion about Jesus' historicity and the similarities we find with pre-Christian deities?
Well, the historicity of Jesus, did Jesus really exist in history? In one sense, that's a rather trivial question, because there were lots of wandering preachers in Palestine at the time. Yehoshua is a very common name. That's the Hebrew version, I understand, of Jesus. So the question, did Jesus exist, is actually not a very interesting question. The question, did Jesus walk on water? Was Jesus born of a virgin? Was Jesus, did Jesus rise from the dead? Did he perform miracles? Did he raise Lazarus from the dead? Well, no, he didn't. Nobody did. So the historicity of the alleged stories about Jesus' miracles and so on, which are the main reason why people take Jesus seriously, no, that never happened. But it's really a non-question. It's not an interesting question whether Jesus himself, whether a man called Jesus existed. Probably lots did, yes.
Is a vegan lifestyle morally superior?
I have to confess, I'm not a vegan. I have to confess that I think it is morally superior. I think that we live in a speciesist society, all of us do. We regard humans as being ultra special, such that cannibalism, for example, is an absolute total no-no. And yet if you think about the fact that we are all evolved beings, we are cousins of all living creatures. If by any chance the intermediates between humans and other species were all living still, which they just happen to be extinct, but if they weren't, we would then have to decide, does this one count as human, or does this one count as human? Can we eat that one? Or is that one too human to be eaten? As it happens, we don't have to face that dilemma because the intermediates are all extinct, and therefore we can be speciesist. Have you come across this word? It's analogous to racist. When you think about something like the raging debate about abortion, and people get really very, very hot under the collar about killing a tiny, few cells human embryo because it's human, whereas this tiny little human embryo is far less capable of feeling pain or feeling fear or feeling hurt than certainly than an adult pig or cow, and there's virtually no difference between a human embryo and a cow embryo or a pig embryo. So our morality is very, very strongly shot through with speciesism. I think my own moral position would probably be that whatever else we do, we want to reduce pain and fear. And so what I would like to see would be very, very stringent controls over farming and over slaughterhouses, over abattoirs, so that if we do go on eating animals, they should be treated kindly until the moment of death, which is not the case at the moment. They are not treated kindly, either in farms or in slaughterhouses. I think, ideally, I would like to see in the future a world in which we are all vegetarian, but as long as we're not, then I think what we should be doing is making sure that animals are treated kindly, even though it makes food more expensive.
How do you feel to be in a country that has convicted someone for blasphemy in the 21st century? And I also have a question from the person that was convicted. He says, is there a place for anti-blasphemy laws in a society? do these kind of laws protect or jeopardize social peace? And if I am to give a bit of background about this, we're talking about a blogger.
Yes.
And he ran a Facebook page that was making fun of a dead Christian Orthodox monk. He manufactured miracles, and then Christian websites reproduced the miracles, reaching 80,000 results in Google. So he exposed that they never, check their sources, and he got 10 months suspended for this.
Well, gosh, I was not aware of that. I rather like the aphorism. I don't know who invented it. Blasphemy is a victimless crime. There is no victim of the crime of blasphemy. The case you describe about the miracles is actually quite reminiscent of another case in India where I think again, a blogger called Edamaraku, he is a scientist, and he went and investigated an alleged miracle where a Christian icon of some sort, I think it was a statue of the Virgin Mary, was said to cry, said to weep. And this was a famous miracle in India, and Christians from all over India made pilgrimage to this statue, which was weeping. And what Edamaraku did was to look behind the statue and find that there was a leaking pipe behind it, which was causing the statue apparently to weep. So he provided a scientific explanation for the alleged miracle. He was prosecuted for blasphemy, for simply showing what had really happened in a miracle, an alleged miracle, and he had to flee India, and he now is living in exile in Finland. It sounds like a rather similar case. Blasphemy is not only a victimless crime, it's an utterly ridiculous crime. And of course, no decent country should have a blasphemy law on its statute books. In a way, one could say that things are even worse in some countries. If he had done the alleged blasphemy in Iran or in Saudi Arabia, he would very probably be dead, not just given a suspended sentence. So it's absurd. It's absurd to send somebody to jail. It's absurd to send somebody into exile. And dare I say, it's even worse to sentence them to death or to 1,000 lashes, which is what the man in Saudi Arabia, Badawi, has been sentenced to.
Back to our friend, the Greek constitution.
Yes.
Article 109 grants special status for Athos Peninsula to Aioros, where entrance to female persons and residency of persons of other religions is prohibited. Women, as you know, in science and outside of science, are still facing severe struggles and inequality. Do you think religion has played a big role in establishing this inequality? Do you think feminism is a secularist issue, and are you a feminist?
I'm certainly a feminist. I don't think I visited Mount Athos. I've sailed past Mount Athos, and I was told the story that there are no women allowed there. And I was told, is it true that not even female sheep? Is that possible? I see. I didn't know that. I don't believe that. I am completely baffled by this very strong tendency for certainly the three Abrahamic religions to, in some cases, despise women is not too strong a word, but certainly treat women badly. It's true, I think, that that Orthodox Jews are trained to say every day, I thank God that thou hast not made me a woman. That is what Orthodox Jews say every day. The Roman Catholic Church forbids women priests. The Greek Orthodox Church forbids women priests. The Church of England has until recently had no women priests, and until very recently had no women bishops. The biblical grounds for this are specious, to say the least. Jesus had no women disciples, they were all men. Jesus had no non-Jewish disciples. There are all sorts of things you could say about Jesus' disciples. The idea that you've got to have a penis in order to do the Eucharist, what a preposterously silly idea, that something about having a penis qualifies you to perform this sacrament. I think actually you have to have testicles. Because I think it's somewhere it says that if you don't have testicles, you can't. I mean, this is material for ridicule. What we have to do is laugh at these people. I mean, make fun of them. They're utterly ridiculous in their prohibitions. But it's serious. It's more than just ridiculous. It's serious in the case of the abuse of women, which is historically rife in all three of the Abrahamic religions, and is now especially pernicious and especially horrible in Islam, where in Islamic theocracies like Saudi Arabia, women are not allowed to drive, they're not allowed out of the house unless accompanied by a male relative, who as a special concession can be a little boy of 8, but he's got to be male. Otherwise, they're not allowed out, and they have to cover up their hair, not allowed to show more than a tiny bit of skin. What is the origin of the hatred of women in religion? I cannot understand it. It's baffling. I guess I would like to understand it, but I find it completely incomprehensible. Maybe some people have ideas about it, but I have none. I think it's just totally and utterly mysterious.
Within these first few months of 2015, hate crimes against lesbian, gay, bisexuals and trans people in Greece have already doubled. The church has been key in instrumenting hostility and delaying the plan of the government to legislate legal recognition. Recently, a Greek bishop, one that I particularly like to annoy, said that homosexuality is a deadly sin. The more moderate Christians responded saying that he's an extremist and he does not represent religion. Yet, if we pick up the Bible and we go to Leviticus 20:13, it says that, quote, "If a man lie with another man, as he does with a woman, both of them have committed abomination. They shall surely be put to death. Their blood shall be upon them." Why do you think religion obsesses over people's sexual lives?
Well, I think it's amazing that I'm learning about Greece now, but in America as well. It's very clear that this issue of prejudice against homosexuals is uppermost in the mind of enormous numbers of religious people. They're not interested in real problems like people being killed and disease and starvation and all the things terrible things that are going on in the world. The thing they really, really care about is persecuting gays. I mean, imagine the idea that the creator of the universe, the architect of the laws of physics and the constants of physics, the designer of the expanding universe, has knowledge of everything, knowledge of physics, knowledge of relativity, quantum physics, everything in his giant brain. But what he really cares about is the sex of the person you go to bed with. I mean, how petty, how trivial a mind it is that can think that. As I said before about the misogyny, it completely baffles me. I mean, no, I've said enough.
Don't you find it funny that out of all places, Greece would be the country
well, I do.
that
I mean,
is
in
in
the
denial?
Sense that, I don't know how many of you know the novels of Mary Renault. She's a I think she's South African actually, novelist who writes beautiful novels about ancient Greece, including ancient Athens, including the Athens of Plato and Xenophon and people. And the dominant thing that comes out of this novel for me is the beauty, really, of the homosexual love, which was common in ancient Athens. So if you haven't read Mary Renault, I recommend her. My favorite is The Last of the Wine. And so, yes, it is in a way, I suppose, surprising what you say.
In Greece, most people would oppose a secular state. What would be the benefits of a secular state?
Well, a non-secular state, a religious state, is a state based upon superstition. In the 21st century, we don't understand everything about the world and the universe, but we understand an enormous amount about how things work, how the universe works. The education that can now be given to a child in the 21st century is thrilling. What a child can be told now about the universe, about the world, is utterly mesmerizingly thrilling. I've said it before, that any child of, say, 14 or 15 in the educated part of the world today could give Aristotle a tutorial and thrill Aristotle to the core of his being. That's the world we actually live in. And yet we're being dragged backwards by religious interests who are trying to keep us in the past and not let us advance into the rational future.
Another question from the Atheist Union of Greece. Given that most religions are geographically bound, is the internet instrumental in giving us perspective, in challenging faith? And do you think the role of the internet might change in the future?
The internet could be our great big hope because it does transcend boundaries, and computers are getting cheaper and cheaper. Moore's law states that computer power doubles every 18 months. It's an empirical law. Nobody quite understands why it happens, but it seems to be true. And it means that computer power is becoming ever more available, ever more cheap. And so it probably won't be that far in the future when just about everybody in the world will have access to the internet. Governments can try to censor it, and some of them do, but it's going to be increasingly difficult for them to do so. And this means that although it is true that pernicious doctrines can be spread on the internet, it's also true that the truth can be spread on the internet. And I think I have enough faith in humanity to believe that when people are actually exposed to the truth, they will embrace it. So I do think that the internet could be the big thing that's changing us, and maybe a vast change for the better. I do hope so, anyway.
Will there ever be concrete evidence that there is a God or that there isn't?
I find it quite hard now to imagine what evidence would look like for a God. I used to think it was obvious that if suddenly, at this very moment, a great booming voice suddenly said, "I exist." There was a time...
the opposite, how funny that would be.
I do not exist. I used to think that that would be absolute cast-iron evidence. But I'm starting now to wonder a bit about that. I mean, if that did happen, my first thought, I think you probably agree, would be that somebody's playing a trick, that somebody's concealed an amplifier behind there, or a clever conjuring trick. When you think about, let's talk about supernatural generally rather than specifically God, miracles. Anybody who's seen a really good conjurer, a stage magician, has seen things that look more miraculous than anything in any holy book. I mean, a great conjurer like Jamie Ian Swiss, just doing card tricks, performs feats of illusion which, if one didn't know better, if he didn't actually say this is a trick, I would say that's got to be a miracle. How could it possibly not be a miracle? So I think I come back to Hume's principle when he said that the evidence for a miracle has got to be such as would not be produced by, has got to be such that a hoax or a trick or a lie is not more plausible. And so I find it very hard to imagine what a supernatural event could ever even be. Certainly, virtually anything in our modern world would seem like a miracle to somebody in the Middle Ages, somebody, say, 500 years ago. Arthur C. Clarke, the great science fiction writer, coined Clarke's third law, which is any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. In 500 years' time, the technology of the future, if we haven't gone extinct by then, will seem like miracles to us. If we could get in a time machine and go forward 500 years, what we would see would seem to be miraculous. So I don't even know what a supernatural demonstration would look like. So I can't quite imagine what evidence for a God would look like. Evidence against a God is strictly logically impossible, I think, because you can't actually prove the absence of something. But my reason for not believing in a God is that my entire life has been devoted to biology, evolutionary biology, and the Darwinian interpretation of it, which is an explanation for how complex things, such as intelligences, came into being from simple beginnings by natural means, by slow, gradual evolutionary change. To postulate an intelligence at the outset is to deny the entire scientific enterprise, because you're postulating the very thing you're trying to explain, which is something complicated, intelligent, capable of designing a universe. Something that's capable of designing a universe is highly complex and needs an explanation in its own right. If you're allowed to get away with simply saying, oh, he just happened to exist, then you might as well say that of the entire universe, you might as well say that of the whole of life. You're just copping out. You're evading the responsibility of explanation. So it's a non-explanation, and I find that extremely powerful evidence, although not final proof, of the non-existence of any kind of supernatural creator.
Which measurable result did you consider a success in your fight against religion? And has there been enough progress?
I haven't looked into statistical evidence very much. I am aware that the number of people who claim to be religious is going down and down and down in Europe, even in America. It's much higher in America. America stands out like a sore thumb if you plot religiosity against prosperity. All the economically successful countries of Europe and America, but you're measuring that, and you find the United States stands out as vastly more religious than any other. But even in America, the numbers are going down, down and down and down and down. In Northern Europe, religion is now a minority. So those are measurable statistics that things are moving in the right direction. You ask about my personal noticing of this. I only have the letters that I get letters sent to my website, and things like that, and they too are immensely encouraging. Notwithstanding the introductory film which you saw, I get far more letters of a positive nature.
Many people in the Western world today are claiming the right to form relationships outside the norm of monogamy. Is there an evolutionary advantage for monogamy, and has religion played a part in establishing a normative monogamy?
If you look at mammals and birds, there are a great variety of different breeding systems. If you're asking me about evolution, I have to look comparatively at these things. There are many species which are monogamous, and there are many species which are polygynous, one man, many women, one female, many males. There are just a few which are polyandrous, one female, many males. There are some which are promiscuous. So that we see a great variety of different breeding systems. And it's usually possible to give an interpretation of this in some kind of ecological terms. So, for example, there's a concept called the polygyny threshold, where the idea is that, say, in birds, a male bird can have enough economic resources in his territory that it becomes worth a female's while to be his second wife. In other species, the economic resources sequestered by a male are only sufficient to support one wife. In other cases, it may be sufficient to support 3 wives. And so natural selection tends to favor a breeding system in which the appropriate economic equalities are achieved. So you tend to get polygyny, that's one male, many females, harem systems. You tend to get harem systems in species where it's possible for males to commandeer a disproportionate share of wealth, where wealth is measured in different ways in different species. Polygynous harem-based species, you can often recognize them because males are often larger than females. You have sexual dimorphism. And so you have things like seals, where bull seals are very large and cow seals are relatively small. These are harem-based societies. So you can recognize a polygynous society by strong sexual dimorphism. Humans are slightly sexually dimorphic, not as much as, say, seals or bison or something like that, but sufficiently sexually dimorphic that it's reasonable to suppose that at least some of our ancestors were polygynous, but also there's a good case to be made that some of them were monogamous. So it looks as though both these systems can be and have been supported in evolution in the past. As for what we should do, the great principle to remember is that there is absolutely no reason, as I've said before, no reason why we should regard our Darwinian heritage as a recipe for what we morally or politically ought to do. And so if people want to live in any kind of polyamorous relationship of any kind, then they should feel free to do so. And at least they should not be guided by evolutionary considerations. They might be guided by other kinds of sociological considerations, say, about the welfare of children, something of that sort. And that's what should be guiding us, rather than evolution, interesting as evolution is.
Thanasis Chaberis wants to know what was your incentive to become an atheist and when did that happen? And he also asks me to tell you he loves everything you've done and that you really inspire him.
Well, that's very nice to hear, thank you. Incentive is a funny word to use. I don't think I ever had an incentive to become an atheist. I didn't want to become an atheist, I just thought. So thinking rationally leads you to a certain conclusion. Evidence leads you to a certain conclusion. And that is the only reason why you should believe anything, evidence. There is no evidence for any kind of supernatural being, anything supernatural at all, indeed. And so it is evidence that should guide you to your beliefs, and it certainly did in my case. Was there another part to that?
I'm so sorry, I was looking at the
Was
next
there
question.
another part to
whether you
that
answered it
question?
all.
Go on to the next one.
Is
I
that
think we
okay?
did that.
Christos Athanasiadis wants to know, do you feel like God in place of God?
No.
Manos Glamdakis wants to know, if we instill a rational way of thinking in education, would that be enough for a fairer world?
For a what world?
For a fairer.
If we do what?
If we instill a rational way of thinking in education.
I would have thought so, yes. I can't see. I mean, certainly there's absolutely nothing wrong with a rational. I mean, all education should be rational, and I think that probably would lead to a fairer world. Yes, I can't see that it wouldn't.
Who are your real-life heroes and heroines?
I should mention Hypatia or Hypatia, a great martyr for rationalism and for feminism, indeed. I should mention Charles Darwin, who not only was a supreme rationalist and thinker, but also a very, very nice man who is admirable in every respect. Bertrand Russell, I think, a passionate skeptic, as he called himself, who followed logical thought to its conclusion in everything he did, sometimes ending up in a rather ruthless place, but always prepared to justify, always prepared to argue for the case he was making. I'm sure I'll think of more in a moment, but go ahead with the next question.
Okay, this one is for the cheap applause. Do you speak any Greek?
Alas, no. I learned ancient Greek at school. I don't speak any modern Greek at all, and I've actually forgotten most of my ancient Greek, but it is quite useful to me in biology, because so many of the technical terms in biology and science generally come from Greek, for the obvious reason that so much of our culture, so much of our civilization originated not only in Greece but here in Athens.
I'm going to final questions.
Right.
Okay. So the next one goes like this, quote, "You only have one offspring and your genes make me want to procreate," unquote. And the question is, have you ever or would you consider donating sperm?
Well, I've never been asked that question. I guess in the spirit of liberal open-mindedness, I'm up for anything.
Great. The next one is a quote by Hitchens. So he said, "Never be a spectator of unfairness or stupidity. Seek out argument and disputation for their own sake. The grave will supply plenty of time for silence. You revered him as one of the greatest orators of all times." Christopher Hitchens, in his last book, Mortality, and this quote in particular, is a bit about death and posterity, and how it is a motivation to live life fully. What is death for you?
Well, first I want to say about Christopher Hitchens how greatly I admired him. I think he was probably the greatest orator I ever heard. He was passionate, he was rational, he was erudite, he knew an enormous amount, he could pull historical references, literary references out of his head at any time. I think I was the last person to interview him before his death. I interviewed him on behalf of New Statesman, a British political magazine, and we spent a long time at the house that he was lent in Texas. And apropos what you were just saying, Elisa, I said to him that I was rather conscious of being described as strident and shrill, and that I felt perhaps I ought to tone down my own words in that respect. And he was immediately passionate. Don't ever do that, he said. You have something to say. Be as strident as you like. Don't apologize for that. And I was moved by that, by, I suppose, coming towards the end of his life. And I've remembered that. You asked me about death. Death is where we will return to the state we were before we were born. I think it was Mark Twain who said, I was dead for billions of years before I was born and never suffered the smallest inconvenience. And that is how it will be. I love life. I want to go on living as long as I'm capable of living life to the full. I have a lot more to learn. I hope perhaps even something to teach. And so I do not look forward to death because I look forward to life. But when I'm dead, I will know nothing about it. And so in a way, the best way to think of it is that as long as we are here, as long as we are here in the present, this is it. And we should live life to the full because the present is what we have. When we are dead, there will be no present. So enjoy life, help others to enjoy life, be helpful to others, be altruistic to others, and appreciate this one life, because it's the only life you're ever going to get. And give up, forget your vain and presumptuous desire for a second one.
The last question comes from my wife, sitting right there.
Oh.
She asks, how do you wish to be remembered as? What words should come up when people talk about you?
I suppose I would wish to be remembered as a rationalist, a teacher, a passionate believer in science and reason. I would not wish to be remembered in a negative way, although I fear that may be the case. My attitude is purely positive, and if I have been negative about, say, religion, it's because I think that religion is itself a negative force standing in the way of positive rationality and a scientific understanding of this beautiful world and wonderful universe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please join me in thanking Professor Richard Dawkins.
Να πω το εξής, ότι από ό,τι καταλαβαίνετε, εδώ πέρα μιλάμε για έναν άνθρωπο ο οποίος το μόνο πράγμα που χρησιμοποιεί είναι το μυαλό του. Για την ακρίβεια, αν έκανε ποτέ μια δικιά του μονοπρόσωπη εκκλησία, δεν θα έλεγε I'll pray for you, θα έλεγε I'll think for you. Να πω ότι όταν τον είχα συναντήσει πριν από 5 χρόνια, τελειώνοντας, πιάνοντας το τελευταίο κομμάτι της κουβέντας, θεώρησα και εγώ ότι να τον ρωτήσω μια μακάβρια τελευταία ερώτηση, ότι τι θα θέλατε να γραφτεί στον τάφο σας όταν θα πεθάνετε. Και η απάντηση ήταν προσπάθησε να σκεφτεί. Οπότε, όχι προσπάθησα να σκεφτώ, προσπάθησε να σκεφτεί. Να πούμε ότι σήμερα και αύριο στην Αθήνα, στην Ελλάδα, βρίσκεται ένας από τους μεγαλύτερους εν ζωή επιστήμονες. Βρίσκεται ένας άνθρωπος ο οποίος γενικά για όλες τις γενιές, όλες τις εποχές, είναι πολύ σημαντικό να ξέρουν ότι ανάμεσά τους ζουν και κινούνται σημαντικοί άνθρωποι που σκέφτονται, που πάνε την ανθρωπότητα μπροστά, που πάνε την κοινωνία μπροστά. Κάτι ακόμα, ότι ο Ρίτσαρντ Ντόκινς είναι σημείο αναφοράς και για τους θεωρητικούς φυσικούς. Οι θεωρητικοί φυσικοί τον αναφέρουν όταν έρχεται στην βιολογία, η σπουδαίοι θεωρητική φυσική. Και επίσης να πω ότι, ξαναλέω, είναι πολύ σημαντικό το ότι ένας από τους πραγματικά influential people στον κόσμο, γιατί πολλοί κατά περιόδους γίνονται influential, εδώ μιλάμε για έναν άνθρωπο που είναι influential σε διάρκεια, ότι επισκέπτεται την Ελλάδα και κάποιοι μπορούν να τον ακούσουν. Και είμαστε πάρα πολύ χαρούμενοι και τον ευχαριστούμε άλλη μια φορά για αυτό που ήταν εδώ. Να είστε καλά.